Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Alia. I'm working with Awana Digital, and we're delighted for you to join our webinar. We're going to wait a few more moments to see who else joins. We'll probably start in another couple of minutes. So in the meantime, please enjoy the music. So good morning again, good afternoon, welcome to everybody. I'm Alia from Awana Digital, and this is the third CoMapeo webinar we're giving as an introduction to the tool. It's part of a series, and there are a couple more coming up in the next few weeks. So please, if you find this useful, send on information to others who might like to join one of the future webinars. There will be one in English with translation into Bahasa, and there'll also be one in Portuguese for users in Brazil specifically. If you need interpretation today, we have interpreters, Pierro interpreting into French, and Ronald interpreting into Kiswahili. So please, there's a button, there should be a button that looks like the one on the screen now at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It could be in the sort of further options, the more options if you don't see it. If you click on there, you should see the options for changing language. So we're thrilled that you could join us today, and we look forward to telling you a little bit more about CoMapeo and answering some questions you might have about why and how to use it. There are a few members of our team on the call today. There is Emily, the founder and executive director of Awana Digital, who will be joining me as a presenter, and Maria, who supports many of our partners in Africa. and Tomas, who supports partners in Peru. They'll be our tech support and also help with answering questions. I've been with Awana Digital for nearly 10 years, and my role is to support our team working with partners and communities. I'm British, and I'm talking to you today from Catalonia. We'd love to get a sense of who is in this virtual space with us today, so we invite you to introduce yourselves in the chat, adding your name, your organization, and your community, and the territory or country that you're joining us from. I believe we also have this slide deck translated into French and Kiswahili. So I think Maria is going to put the links to those where you can access that slide deck into the chat. So you should be able to follow along in a different language if you prefer. But first of all, let me tell you a little bit about Awana Digital. Since 2008, we've been working with local community partners around the world to support them to use technology to defend their rights and to protect critical ecosystems. You might have known us as Digital Democracy. We changed our name about 2 years ago now to Awana Digital because it better reflects our values and our mission. Awana is a Quechua word that means to weave, and we see our role as supporting people to weave technology into their work as land defenders. Awana Digital is a relatively small organization of about 18 people. Most of the team is in North and South America, and there are 3 of us in Europe, including myself. We have a tech development team that does the coding and design work to build CoMapeo, and we have a partner and community-facing team, which supports users of the tool, gathers feedback for our design process, and creates the materials and guides to make CoMapeo more widely accessible. I'll pass you over to Emily now to tell you a little bit more about our plan for today's session.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. Our plan today is to spend about half an hour talking about giving this presentation, sharing about CoMapeo, and then the rest of the call we'll spend answering questions. For the agenda, we're going to cover what is CoMapeo, why we created it, who it's for, how it can be used, where it's being used, and then, of course, going into the Q&A. So first, as Alia said, we invite you, and it's great to see names already coming in, to write your name and organization and or the community you represent and where you're calling in from. I'll do that. I'm actually in my parents' home in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is traditional territory of the Miami peoples in the kind of center eastern United States. As Alia already said, I'm the co-founder and executive director of Awana Digital. And then in addition to sharing that information in the chat, we invite you to converse in the chat. You can, talk to each other, react, share comments. And then there's a Q&A feature. It has a different button that you can press for writing questions as they emerge. If what we're saying sparks a question, feel free to write it in, and we'll make sure to cover it at the end of the session. As well, when we do begin the Q&A, we'll invite people to come off mute and to share if you want to put your voice into the chat and actually speak your question. We'll invite you to do so when we get to the Q&A. So the first and most basic question, what is CoMapeo? Well, if any of you have used it or its predecessor, Mapeo, feel free to mention that in the chat, but most of you are probably new to the tool. CoMapeo is a platform that Awana Digital has been stewarding for over a decade. It's both a mobile and desktop tool for collaborative mapping and place-based monitoring. We co-designed it with Indigenous communities who are working to protect their land and rights, but it can be used by many other communities. It is a free and open source tool. CoMapeo Desktop is available for all platforms, including Mac, Windows, and Linux, while CoMapeo Mobile is currently only available for Android phones, but will be available for Apple iOS later this year. So why did we create it? I'm going to pass that back to Alia.
Thank you, Emily. Why did we create CoMapeo? A couple of decades ago, some of our team was working alongside different indigenous communities in the Western Amazon, in Peru and in Ecuador, supporting territory mapping and monitoring initiatives there. And this work, which many of you will likely know, is so important because mapping ancestral territory use and the threats to it can provide critical evidence that communities can use to defend their rights. However, what we found at the time was that the mapping technologies which were available for communities to use fell short on multiple fronts, and many times they created dependencies within the communities. For example, much of the technology at the time required internet connectivity. This was long before the days of Starlink, and many communities had to travel far and long to reach places with a good connection. The technology also often relied on centralized databases, which weren't owned or even managed by communities. Control over data and knowledge was therefore given up to others, either external experts or large companies where data was hosted. The technology was often also hard to learn. It wasn't in the right local languages, and it often didn't have very intuitive interfaces. The tech and the software might also have been expensive to maintain access to in the long run, but just wasn't appropriate for many people. Fast forward a few years, and in 2015, the Waorani people of Ecuador asked Awana Digital to support a new territory mapping initiative, which they wanted to manage themselves. They wanted to create a map that showed all the life, history, and culture within their lands. They tried out the existing mapping and GIS software first, but then together we decided to rather than rely on that, which wasn't appropriate, we decided to co-develop a new tool which would enable them to map their lands and manage their data themselves in their communities without needing internet access. And that's really how Mapeo, which became CoMapeo, was born. And over the following 4 years, the Waorani team created maps of 22 communities, documenting sacred and historical sites, medicinal plants and hunting camps, and georeferencing and naming the hundreds of rivers and streams that run through their territory. With Mapeo, they were able to demonstrate that the empty space that appeared on the state's maps was in reality full of life and critical to their and other beings' survival. It was and is territory lived in and loved by the Waorani for generations. The Waorani were then able to use these maps in a court case against the state because the government had created oil concessions that overlapped their lands without following a proper consultation process. The Waorani won that legal case and protected 200,000 hectares of Amazon forest from drilling. And they demonstrated how powerful community-led mapping can be when it has the strength and the united communities behind it. We went on to work with many of their neighbours and allies across the Amazon to further develop and refine Mapeo. And last year, we launched an improved and updated tool, CoMapeo. So I'll pass you back to Emily for some more details about who CoMapeo is for and why you might want to use it.
So CoMapeo is for any community of people who are looking for an easy-to-use tool that will enable them to gather, manage, and use place-based information, photos, and videos while protecting their data. Current users include Indigenous communities, community-led conservation groups, environmental defenders, traditional knowledge keepers, farmers and agroecologists, community organizers, foragers, and human rights activists. And it can be used anywhere in the world and probably will be, and hopefully will be over the coming years. But we've been co-designing closely with partners in the Amazon rainforest, East Africa, and Indonesia and the Pacific Islands. And we'll tell you some more case studies about this later when we get to that section. So why might communities want to use it? There's a variety of reasons, and many are using for multiple reasons, but it's a tool that can be used for documenting threats, such as illegal logging or land grabs, for mapping ancestral territory to create maps for land claims, for collecting biodiversity data, fostering intergenerational knowledge sharing, and in general, any use case that will support safeguarding territories and culture for future generations. There's also a few reasons why communities might want to use CoMapeo over other tools. And to be clear, as a nonprofit, our mission is not to focus on the tool itself, but really supporting communities to use whatever technology is right for them. So there also may be reasons not to use it, but some of the reasons you might want to use it are it's offline first, meaning that all of the functionality can work even when you're far away from a cell phone connection or internet access. It's intuitive and easy to use, so it's a very good tool for first-time users and community members who don't have a lot of experience with technology. It's secure and focuses on protecting data. It's customizable into local languages and visually customizable as well. It respects Indigenous data sovereignty, meaning that it's focused on ensuring that the data is kept and controlled by the community themselves, and it is free and open source. I'm going to pass it back to Alia to share some of the key features.
Thank you. So when you first open CoMapeo Mobile, you get a screen which shows you a map of where you are. CoMapeo uses your phone's GPS signal to show you your position on that map. The GPS in the phone is not usually attached to the phone or Wi-Fi signal, so it should work even if you don't have reception. I see there's a question in the chat about if CoMapeo can be used offline. It can be used totally offline if necessary. Once you've downloaded the tool, all of the functionality will be there offline. You can then capture your position and you can save your location, tagging it with a category, such as one of the ones on the middle screen there. For example, community. And then you can add further details to that observation, such as photos, notes, and you can answer questions about the point taken. So you could answer, what is the community's name, or how many people live here? Both the background map and the list of icons and categories, as well as the questions that are asked with those categories, can be completely customized to your needs. Or you can stick with the default options that come with CoMapeo. If you're going the customization route, there's a little bit more tech knowledge is necessary to do that, but it's still relatively simple. And we're building more materials to explain how to do that for people. And here, for example, you can see some community monitors in the Solomon Islands who are using CoMapeo to take an observation with a photo as part of a biodiversity monitoring project that they're working on. Now, in addition to photographs and notes, you can also add audio clips up to a maximum of 5 minutes to your observations. These could be, for example, soundscapes, oral histories, testimonies of human rights abuses, or you could simply record audio instead of taking notes if it's safer to do so or if typing isn't an option. You can also collect a track so your GPS can work in the background as you walk along, and in this way you can add footpaths or boundaries to your maps. And you can work with a team. CoMapeo allows you to set up the roles of coordinator and participant with different permissions within a named project. The project keeps all of your data safe and together because only members of a project can see the data collected within it. And in this image, you can see members of our partners in Kenya from Mount Elgon collecting an audio recording of birdsong, which they do as part of ongoing monitoring they do of the bamboo forest every 3 months. And then to exchange your data with other team members, you can do this whilst remaining offline by setting up a temporary local network. So you can set up a hotspot from another phone without internet, or use a small router to create a local network. There's also a way of exchanging data online if you'd like to go that route, and I'll explain about that shortly. Your phone can also manage different CoMapeo projects at the same time. For example, you could have a project about mapping work, mapping your ancestral lands, and another one monitoring risks. Or a coordinator of an ally organization could have different projects from different communities which they oversee and work with, all available on their device at the same time, without the data from projects getting mixed up. CoMapeo is also very customizable, as I said, and you can have the questions and the categories appear in your language. You can choose your own icons, and you can set up your own offline custom map to use whilst collecting data. Now, Emily mentioned another tool, CoMapeo Desktop. which is a sister tool to CoMapeo Mobile. And as she said, it works for Windows, Linux, and Mac. If you prefer to use CoMapeo without a computer, you're welcome to do that, and the workflow can also be complete that way. But we have found that many people prefer using a computer for more easily editing, viewing, and managing their data, especially if you want to show it to others. The desktop version works similarly to the mobile, but you can't create new data within it. So you can't make new points or make new lines or tracks. You can just view and edit the data that you've collected on CoMapeo Mobile. From both the mobile and the desktop, you can export your data to a GeoJSON file, which then allows you to use it in other GIS programs such as QGIS or ArcGIS and create maps and other products that way. And on this screen, you can see one of the Warani mapping team members, and they're checking the collected data with an ELDER using CoMapeo Desktop. It's much easier to do on a computer screen than on a small phone screen. And in this image here, you can see one of the mapping validation meetings that the Ogiek in Kenya held. They were able to project CoMapeo Desktop onto a screen so that everybody in the village could see it, and then they could easily check through and verify the data together, correcting spellings or adding extra information in. Now, people often ask us, if CoMapeo isn't connected to the internet or to a server, where is the data stored? The data is all stored locally on people's phones and computers in what is called a peer-to-peer decentralized database. So this means that all of the data is exchanged with others within a project. They're your peers. And the database, so all of the data within a project, is copied onto all of those devices. So if Emily and I are on the same project and working together, I'll be able, once we've exchanged, I'll see all of Emily's data and Emily will see all of my data. Now, as I've said, the exchange of data itself can work without internet because you can use a router or a hotspot to create a small offline network that will allow the data to be shared between project members. But it's also possible to do this online now, because for some people, having access to the internet has opened up other possibilities. And although for some people, keeping data offline is still important for security or practical reasons, for others, it's more useful now to be able to connect with people online. So we've built a feature called the Remote Archive. The Remote Archive stores your data from a project in an online server, and it allows people to exchange with that server remotely. So, for example, if Emily and I were working on a project and we weren't physically together in the same place, the data could exchange via the Remote Archive, and Emily could get my data, even though she's over there, far away, and I'm over here in Catalonia in Spain. So we built the remote, this feature, which coordinators can add to a project. It's completely optional. You can still use the application completely offline if you wish to, or you can add the Remote Archive, and it will then store a copy of all of the data exchanged with it. So it can also act as a backup for your data. The data is stored on servers which we oversee. So, for some people, there might be security risks involved there. It's up to communities to decide whether they want to add this feature. Now, I realize I've given you a lot of information, some of it quite technical, hopefully not too technical. I'm going to pass you back to Emily, though, who will tell you about some of the people using CoMapeo protecting their lands and livelihoods.
Thank you, Alia. So we wanted to end the presentation just sharing some of the stories from our partners as one of the best ways to illustrate how CoMapeo can be used in different contexts. Despite the diversity of the stories, we think there's really a common aim of what they're doing to take care of their land, defend what they love, and protect against threats, including threats that are common, unfortunately, across different regions across the world, including mining, poaching, oil drilling, evictions, and fortress conservation. So first we'll begin in the Amazon and the Javari River Valley in Brazil, where a coalition of Indigenous guardians has come together to form a group called Univaja, and they've been working to protect their territory against many threats, including logging, gold mining, illegal fishing, and other land invasions. All told, they protect 8.5 million hectares of Amazon rainforest, a really enormous landscape. And they've been using CoMapeo since 2021, and today have over 100 rangers who are actively using CoMapeo to share information. They travel along the many river basins in boats and use the remote archive sync feature to be able to share the information across the distance. They've reported hundreds of infractions to the Brazilian government. Then in Tanzania and East Africa, we've been fortunate enough to work with a group called Final Governance that are a Maasai community working their legal organization actually that works to protect Maasai rights and support the communities who are living in protected areas. So since 2024, they have been facing threats in the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, has been facing threats of eviction. So they began working to map the entire area, to map the relationship between the Maasai communities and local wildlife, and to document their sacred and historical sites. The maps have been used to demonstrate their customary land use and pastoralist practices, and have also been used to map where resources are for the community. They've also submitted evidence of evictions and other threats to the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And then finally, in the Solomon Islands in the Pacific, we've been working with a local community, the Mai Messina Greenbelt, who have been using Mapeo and CoMapeo since 2022 to monitor the last remaining intact forest in the Sky Island regions. In 2024, the community monitors used CoMapeo along with satellite alerts and one of our partner tools, Guardian Connector, to report evidence of illegal logging to the Ministry of the Environment. And on this basis, the government was able to step in and stop illegal logging. Given the success of the work on Malaita Island, there's another organization called the Islands Knowledge Institute, which works across the Solomon Islands and has recently just expanded the monitoring program to other communities. And then to share one more example from sub-Saharan Africa, we've been working in Kenya for many years with the Ogiek people of Mount Elgon. Alia mentioned a couple examples from them, where they have been initially, they began a detailed territory mapping project for their own purposes, for land management practices, and then they use the maps for a legal case to win back a key portion of their territory to have the legal rights to maintain. They're now using CoMapeo for an innovative biodiversity monitoring program to determine for their own purposes how to better manage the landscape, and also to protect forest-dwelling elephants that are often wounded by poachers living outside of their area. Alia, I'll pass it back to you for the final slides.
Thanks, Emily. So here is a QR code you can use. It'll take you to the to where you can download the app CoMapeo, and also the web address comapeo.app, where you can find guides and more information about the tool. And then a few more web pages. Our website here, Awana Digital, and firstoffenderstoolkit.com, where there are some other useful tools and case studies which you might find useful. And our email, support@comapeo.app. We would love to hear from you after this webinar, but we would also love to hear from you now if there are any questions. I know there have been a few that have been answered already, some of them in the chat and some of them in the Q&A. There's one question in the Q&A which I'll read out from Michael. If you would like to ask a question and use your voice rather than typing it, please raise your hand, and then we will we'll turn on your mic so that you can ask us directly. But Michael's question, is the tool flexible enough to allow users to add their own categories in the app or desktop version, apart from the default categories already provided? Yes, quite simply, Michael, it is possible. We've built a sort of category generator, it's called. It's a spreadsheet where there are different tabs on the spreadsheet where you would add the different information. So you add the name of the category, you add the icon, you add the questions you'd like to associate with it, whether those questions are text questions or number questions or option questions. So there's quite a bit of customization which you can do. That spreadsheet is reasonably simple to use, but it does require, a little bit of knowledge of how to use a spreadsheet. But we have some materials explaining how to do that. And then you sort of hit a create category file, and then it sort of does its little process, and it'll give you a file which you can download. That also enables you to translate the categories into different languages. So you could have the same categories appearing in different languages depending what language the phone was in, for example. And the map, I didn't talk much about this, but the map which appears on the phone automatically is an online map. It's based on OpenStreetMap data. But you can quite easily also build an offline map using QGIS or other tools and export that to use within CoMapeo.
I wanted to answer one of the questions. Lakeepa asked, if CoMapeo is free and open source, what about data security? And I think that's a really good question. So the tool itself, so the way we coded it is open source, meaning that a developer can go online to GitHub and see all the code for how the app runs itself. But the data itself, so any data that's collected by community members, is all stored within the project, as Alia explained. And the way the project data is kept separate is through encryption. So there's a long encrypted key that only allows people who are part of a project to be able to access that data. And that's part of the difference. If anybody else has questions, we'll keep answering the ones that have been written down, but feel free to use the raise hand feature and we can bring you off of mute.
There's a question here about translation. I'm going to pass you over to Maria because she helps coordinate the translation work for CoMapeo.
Thank you, Alia. I'm looking for the question. Where is it? So we are considering using CoMapeo with some community conservancies in Kyrgyzstan. Is there any possibility to add other languages to the app? Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for your question. Yes, you can translate CoMapeo to local languages, and this is something that we've worked since the beginning because we know it's very relevant to have it accessible in the local languages. Similar to the category customization, it does require some steps. We use crowding currently it's a tool to translate tools. So you could reach out to us and we could guide you through the process of translating the app to your language. That is how we are working also in documenting all the steps required for these extra bits of process to customize CoMapeo into local contexts. But we are happy to guide you through what you would need to do to translate. I was also going to jump into a question that is, I think, in the chat from Rui, who is waiting for directives to how to start using CoMapeo. And I just wanted to say, unfortunately, we're keeping this session in general terms. I'm very glad you're excited and you already went to the Play Store and downloaded it. We will share you, and we can share again the link to the written steps that we have to help you get onboarded into CoMapeo. But unfortunately, we won't go into detail on the step-by-step. But we will share that with you, and we will also share a survey because this is the first kind of event like this one that we do. So we will be happy to know if something like that, if a virtual walkthrough, for example, would be useful and how could we best help everyone in their next steps if you're interested in getting onboarded with CoMapeo. In very general terms, when you open it, you would be ready to start mapping. You could map on your own, or you could, as you're saying in your comment, either join a project. If you have a fellow colleague, friend, community member who are already using CoMapeo, they could invite you to their project, or you could create a project and invite people. So that would be, it's a hint maybe to your next step, but I'm happy I'll share in a bit the link to more detailed instructions. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Maria. There's a question that came into the chat as well about different kinds of mapping you can do. From Tammy asks, can one also do mapping of polygons? And is there any basic analysis that can be done in CoMapeo, e.g. size of area, length of any existing or mapped feature? So at the moment, you can't add polygons into CoMapeo. You can add lines. So in theory, you could walk the perimeter of something and track that with CoMapeo Mobile, and therefore sort of add the full area in, but you can't create a polygon within CoMapeo currently. We have a dream of building out CoMapeo Desktop such that you can create points and lines and areas within that and have it more as a sort of very, very simple to use mapping application, but it's not there yet. And there's a lot of work before it gets there. So I'm not making any promises on that. We focused really on the really kind of front line, so the first entry into mapping. So basically basic data collection. And so that's what CoMapeo does. We would like to add more in. We are adding a little bits of analysis in and some filtering and some analysis. I think we do hope to have lengths, for example, in there. It's not there currently, but some of the things you're asking about, we do hope will be in there probably within the next maybe 6 months or so. And some basic analysis of data. So, how many threats am I seeing within this area, or how many threats within a certain date range am I seeing within this area? But all of that is to come over the next few months to a year within CoMapeo Mobile Desktop. Sorry. And there's also a question from Jasmine in the Q&A about transferring data from Mapeo to CoMapeo. So this isn't an easy process, unfortunately. One of the reasons we built CoMapeo as a separate app, or we had to really build CoMapeo as a separate app rather than just making a new updated installation for Mapeo, was that the database structure had to really be quite different. Our team thinks it is possible to what are we calling it? Migrate data from Mapeo to CoMapeo. However, nobody has done it yet. All of the communities we've worked with who used Mapeo and are now using CoMapeo, they all sort of closed their Mapeo projects and then restarted with new projects within CoMapeo. And if they want to use the data together, they use it together in other applications such as QGIS. In theory, it is possible though. And if you have some specific use cases you'd like to discuss where people really want or need to keep the data together, then yeah, Jasmine, we can talk about that.
There was and again, if anybody does want to come off mute, please feel free to just raise your hand and we'll bring you off mute. But Tammy also asked a question of, is there conditional logic in the data model? And this is an intro webinar, so I'm going to give try to give a somewhat simple answer, but we could also, this is probably a longer topic of conversation, but the short answer is that not very much. So right now, the way the app currently works, most of the data that's collected is about which category, and then a particular group can customize survey questions that go off a particular category. So for example, if in a biodiversity monitoring project, if you're documenting a tree species, then the community, can customize it so that you document a tree species first, and then you answer survey questions like, what species is it? Is it healthy? You can ask kind of a series of questions, yes or no, or a number, numeric, and so on. So a community can create more of a logic within that. I will also just say, for the purpose of accuracy, that we may be creating a little bit more of conditional logic in the data model moving forward, but that's something that if we do, we'll share a lot of information about. So I think I've answered that hopefully at a decent intro level, but if anybody else from the team wants to jump in and say anything else, feel free.
Maybe just to add that I guess in the process of moving from Mapeo to CoMapeo, we've learned a lot from partners and people using it. So it's been great in this first year of Mapeo out in the world. We're already learning a lot of the possibilities of CoMapeo within processes like monitoring. So it's also that way people have been using it, and we've been learning how it can be used for monitoring. And I'll share a link. We have a blog post about how the OGEC are using it, the sound feature, in a very meticulous process of monitoring that also involves tracks and quadrants and words that probably we weren't familiar before accompanying them in that process. And we could share what we know and what we learn from the story, if that helps inspire possibilities. But I think, yeah, it would be great for you to check it out and see how it can best support that process.
I'm going back to the Q&A list here. Franklin asks, does the website contain tutorial resources? And we do have lots of resources on the website, written materials. We're hoping to also produce some other materials in other formats, such as little videos and other things. And we also hope to do further webinars, possibly more specific, going through different tasks. So yeah, check out what's on the website. I think, okay, then there's a question from Ahmed about biodiversity monitoring, or indeed any data collection. Ahmed asks, does the app help orient the sampling type analysis, help orient the excuse me. Does the app contain any kind of analyses, such as medians and graphs and things like that? Currently not. CoMapeo desktop currently doesn't. You can just view the data, edit it, a certain amount of management like that, export it to use in QGIS. We're adding an export to CSV, I believe, quite shortly, and that will allow other things to be done with it in a spreadsheet format. And then we're also adding into CoMapeo desktop it's another tool. It's something like Superset or Metabase, if you know those tools, and they're platforms which allow you to kind of plug the data in and then give you a graph or give you a chart or give you a map with hotspots on it, and things like that. So for the moment, we're gonna probably use another tool such as Superset or Metabase and pull on their functionality to provide some basic analyses. We're really trying to keep the tool entry level and not too complex. So obviously, the more people start using it, and then they want to say, "Oh, can it do this? And can it do this? And can we make reports? And some of these things we would love to add, and we do hope to add. And other things we decided, if we keep adding more and more things, we're going to lose the sort of intuitive, easy to use, easy to learn aspect of CoMapeo. And so at some point we will draw a line and say, for further analyses or further kinds of work, export the data and use it in QGIS. And then there's a question from Jamie. If contributors leave a project, is there a way to manage their access to a project, e.g., or i.e. remove their access and their local data copies? So currently you can't, can someone else answer this question better than me?
Hello, I can maybe answer
Thanks,
it.
Thomas.
It's kind of a hard question to answer because the nature of peer-to-peer data sharing makes some of these things complex. So what I can tell you is that if you remove somebody from a project, then what happens is that they can't get any new data, but any old data that they had on their cell phone will still be there. There's no way of like eagerly deleting somebody else's data. They just lose access to any new data. They can't exchange any new data. So yeah, I think that answers the question. It's kind of hard to solve this problem in a peer-to-peer manner because that person can be kicked out of a project, but maybe it's in another part of the world and you never exchange any new data with them and they didn't find out that you kicked them out of the project. So from their point of view, they will keep that old data with them. And it's kind of a hard problem to solve. I think, Emily, you want to chip in?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and this is kind of a more advanced topic. So this is something we go over when we're doing a longer training, the kind of complexities of this. I will say, especially for projects where there's sensitivity to the data, if it's just people kind of casually using the app to say, in a more casual way, it's less of a problem. But it's a really good question. So best practice often for a group, maybe say more of an organization that's doing monitoring work, is that the devices are often being used by, like, especially a coordinator. They're often being used in a way that the device actually belongs to the project. So if somebody leaves the project, the device actually stays with the project. And that's one way to solve the issue. Is that, and this happens all the time, somebody's part of a monitoring team and then needs to leave for whatever reason, then the device can remain with the project so that it's not an issue around data security. But it is definitely something that we would talk about in a more in a deeper dive if you were going to use the tool, how you would solve for that problem.
Thanks, Emily and Thomas. I think sorry.
I just wanted to say we do have some people on the call who've used the tool in other places, and so of course more questions are always welcome. But we could also invite people, if anybody wants to share a brief story or an example from their community, or answer any of the questions that you feel like we maybe missed a detail on. We're very happy to invite others to join, and otherwise we'll stay on for a couple more minutes to answer questions as they come, and we can also end early if there are no other questions. We're also going to send out a survey to everybody to ask for feedback on this session. And one of the questions we're asking is if we were to do more webinars, what type of information would be helpful. So as we've said, some of the questions have been really intelligent and kind of more for advanced cases. So feel free to let us know if that would be helpful.
I'm gonna share the link to the survey here, and also just want to say we're gonna send a following up email later this week with a recording of the session with some useful links and the survey again. If we have 2 more sessions coming next July 1st and July 7th. July 1st will be in Portuguese, and the next one will be in English and Bahasa. So if you know anyone who might be interested, you can either send the link to the recording or also an invite to register for the next sessions.
We have another question from Ray. Okay, so how can you guarantee the safety of project data after departure if people are downloading it and using it offline on their own cell phones? So yeah, as Emily and Thomas said, this is a difficult question to solve. We built CoMapeo as a collaborative tool for teams really within a trusted network. Obviously, there's always the potential that someone who you trust, they could turn out to be an infiltrator, or they could like change sides, and your data could be at risk. And that is a risk. It's a risk when you give data to anybody that they could use it, in the wrong way. So there isn't really a way within CoMapeo of protecting against this. The data is secure on the phones and within CoMapeo. It can't be accessed from outside CoMapeo, but if somebody has it on their phone and they're no longer part of a project, as Thomas was saying, that there are ways that they could then share it. So I think the sort of trust-based circle is really the circle for the people we built this tool for. I don't think anything is foolproof, unfortunately, in this regard. And if we were to build in ways of letting someone access that data and delete it from a centralized place, then we would lose lots of the other benefits about it being this decentralized offline network. So it's kind of one or the other, really. Either it needs an online kind of mother server somehow to control all of the devices, or we have a decentralized network. And we chose the decentralized network because there really aren't any other tools that work like that. If you want a tool that works for the kind of data security that you're talking about, there are probably other tools that would do that, but they wouldn't necessarily be completely offline in the same way that CoMapeo is. So it's really about choosing the right tool for what your most important concerns are. If CoMapeo is deleted from a cell phone, does that delete the data in entirety? If you're not part of a project and you haven't exchanged with anybody else, then yes, that data is gone. If you've got a project, so Thomas and Maria and I are all part of a project and we've been collecting data and we've been exchanging it. If I delete CoMapeo, but I've recently exchanged with Maria or Thomas, they will have a complete copy of the project and all of the data as well. And I can then be re-added to the project and then get a copy back on my new phone. Say I lost my phone, for example. But if you're collecting data on your own and you're not exchanging it with a desktop, with CoMapeo desktop, and you're also not exchanging, you've chosen not to use the remote archive, which is a sort of online backup possibility, then yes, the data is gone. So we always recommend people, if the data is important, have more than one device within that project, or download the data. You can download the data from CoMapeo mobile as a GeoJSON. So if it's just you working on the project and you've only got one phone, just every time you do important data collection, download it as a GeoJSON and save that somewhere else. And then you'll have a backup of your data at least. Well, maybe if we've no more questions or comments, maybe we will go before everyone gets bored. It was really great to talk with you all and chat with you in this way. I see some familiar names in the list of attendees. So yeah, nice to see you and mainly new people. So yeah, it'd be really great to hear from you either through the survey that Maria sent out, or if you'd like to talk, if you've got like other specific questions, please do get in touch and we will help however we can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much for coming. Really great questions. And yeah, we look forward to staying in touch about how the tool might be useful to you.
Thank you, and thank you to the interpreters for making this accessible in Swahili and French. Bye, everyone.